Tonight's an extraordinary moment for all of us who, over the past 6 years, have worked to create the Gannett Project's Visionaries in Motion. The working group and I, together with all of you who followed our series, are celebrating Visionaries in Motion. We are doing so with a final special guest, sculptor Elizabeth Turk. Together, we have had considerable fun, even a few challenges, creating RIT's award-winning multidisciplinary series. Briefly, let me introduce the working group team. Susan Lakin, Martha Morgan, Linda Rubel, who has been with us from the very first moment, Gary Skuse, who has generously let us use the bioinformatics server for our website, Paul Tiemann, if he's here, yay! Ron Jodewin, who pretends he's retired and has left us, but of course he's not. And if she's here, Margie Searle, who is still our affiliate. Annie Wroblewski, our longtime photographer. Chandni Bhowmik, student assistant, aided by Nathan's 1 and 2, Nathan McCorkle and Nathan Schiffer. Matt de Turk. Is Matt here? There you are, Matt. He's created our posters. Cass Shellman, who's not here, but she's our administrative assistant. And the many consultants who have worked with us on our board. Huge thanks also to Bob Smith, WXXI host of 1370 Connection, who has interviewed just about every one of our speakers over the years. Now, please go to our website, cwgp.org, where we've posted all previous videos, interviews, and links to 6 years of speakers and events. They will remain up, visible, and usable. You'll also find something new on our homepage, a red link celebrating Visionaries in Motion. Go to it. Read what our speakers have said about this flagship series. We invite you to use the link to add your own comments. Please do that. Chris, you didn't stand up. There's Chris Tompkins-Tinch, who's our Tonight we're delighted to have with us for the final presentation, sculptor Elizabeth Turk. With degrees from Scripps College and Maryland Institute College of Art, Elizabeth's work has appeared in solo and group exhibitions at Mint Museum in North Carolina, University of Virginia Art Museum, American Institute of Architecture in New York City, the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, and most recently, an exhibit in LA and at the Herschel and Adler Galleries in New York City. Last year, she received no less than a MacArthur Genius Award. She has held the Barnett and Annalee Newman Fellowship, and in 2011, she was named Smithsonian Research Fellow. Although Elizabeth has worked in a number of media, metal, glass, porcelain, also creating drawings, photography, and video, her signature medium is marble. Marble, to which she brings technical virtuosity that defies as it revises an unforgiving substance, and which, as she says, is about what is not there. Her studio has been a marble yard in Santa Ana, her perfect rock, leftover chunks of stone from the Lincoln Memorial sitting out in Tacoma Park. As interested in delicate organic forms of nature as she is in Renaissance lace making, think of her Brilliant Colors series, Elizabeth surprises us with visually arresting feats of precision in sculpture that bring together an impossible fragility with strength. It made perfect sense to me when I learned recently that a major inspiration for her was Louise Bourgeois, a sculptor who died 2 years ago at age 98, and whose witty, often abstract work was both sheltering and protective. As we welcome Elizabeth with her presentation tonight, Emptiness of Matter, we ask that you use these 2 microphones. Maybe there'll be one person on each side who would run them around. Use the roving mics for questions and answers after the talk. Then come upstairs with us to a reception up the steps and continue the conversation. We've got a number of memorial postcards for you up there and quite a nice reception. For now, let's give a warm welcome to Elizabeth Turk.
Because so many of you are students, I decided to do this lecture straight from my crazy new computer so that you could see how I thought. I wanted to I wanted to start with this piece, a video that, let's see if I can get it correct. A video that is really the heart of my work, because in the late 90s I was invited to RIT by a wonderful painter, Clifford Wan, and it was the first time that I had ever presented my work publicly and been paid for it, and I was incredibly honored. And so to come full circle and be invited again is a tremendous, tremendous honor. So thank you. Thank all of you for coming tonight. Let's start with the exhibit that's up in New York at the moment. As I mentioned, the heart of my work is about this amazing focus and total control, and then sort of letting it go, letting the larger elements of nature sort of overtake the work. These pieces I entitled Cages, and the talk tonight I'll go through the process, influences, and inspiration that sort of brings a body of work together. Cage, a simple title, was meant as an entryway or a doorway for people that don't have an art background, because it's pretty obvious. The inside of these is gone, so it sort of looks like a cage. So anybody can relate to that. But then if you take it on another level, the idea that a rock is now missing, that perhaps this line, these are a single line, 800 inches, that defines a sense of space, and without that interior, maybe that was the cage. I like that idea. They're also suspended above stainless steel. The bases are polished on the interior. So there was sort of the idea that we're defined 2-dimensionally and 3-dimensionally by these descriptions, and I guess I'll get into that later, but that in itself seems, this sort of visual information seems, in a way, a cage. But how does this happen? How do I even get to this body of work? Sometimes I don't even know. I look at it as if I'm a stranger. But let's start in the marble yard. I am incredibly spoiled. My studio is outside in California in the middle of a marble yard. And I don't think I could ever give it up, because I have tremendous assistance. I can expand into large projects or small projects, which is a really tough thing for a lot of you graduating. Once you get out of school, you know, how are you going to continue to create your body of work? And it's a tough line to negotiate. Also, the availability of material. I have had the luxury of using the leftovers from different projects. All the pieces, or all the blocks for the cage project, came from a Chiarini marble and stone renovation of this 1920s bank. And this brought in another narrative to the body of work. I love the idea that in the 20s, they were making banks out of solid. It was significant that the entryway be solid, permanent, and a place of security. So how did I get from that to this? In some ways, it seemed like a perfect symbol, like all these blocks are, that represented that, which a bank no longer does, should be hollowed out. So I did. So how do I get from that to, this ethereal shape? I didn't know if it would ever work. I don't think if I had designed it originally, I could have created it. I started small, just with a sphere, and a single line wrapped around a sphere seemed an easy thing to create. The more I hollowed it out, the more I understood the sense of gravity. And with a sphere, there's no up and down. It's really pretty simple. So I continued to open up the sphere, so smaller line with less support. So you can see in the front here, I think this is the only point of contact. All of these lines start to have a further distance from one another. So it was sort of an aha, yes, this will work. So I moved to boxes with an up and down, and now you'll understand when I show you how many influences really revolve around the world of physics. And perhaps you'll understand the title, The Emptiness of Matter. It's much like the cage title. Emptiness, I keep thinking, I'm emptying out my stone. What does that really mean? So I looked it up, and I read, the state of containing nothing, the vast emptiness of space, a quality of lacking meaning. And I thought, oh my God, that's not what I'm trying to do. Impart no meaning. This is supposed to impart a whole reservoir of meanings. So there was sort of a twist, and then I thought, well, maybe I should have added the question mark. It should be, really? The emptiness of matter? It also seemed to me kind of interesting that right at this horizon of getting so much information about space, that we would continue to think of space as empty. So the first part of this talk will really deal more with the emptying out and the process of creating the sculpture, and the second half just matter and the twist on the idea of matter, because I also don't think of matter as truly distinct from mind and spirit, but actually governed by the same laws. And once again, that takes us back to gravity. When I was a political science student, yes, I have a very modeled background, I went to Pompeii, and the idea of emptiness in these plaster casts, that they had these holes that could have that much information, was stunning. So suddenly I began to see in the negative space and what was possible, what information was possible in that space that wasn't readily available. And this is each of the influences and inspiration panels. I sort of collaged websites or TED interviews, so if any of you wanted to gather the information for further discovery on your own, it should all kind of be up there. So this led to reading a lot by this crazy guy, a friend of mine who's a physicist, and basically his theme is that space is evolving on biological terms. So I thought, aha, maybe my space can evolve to all these different meanings. So here's a block. Again, a block originally cut from the bank building. I like the idea of marrying the old and the new, this very traditional, ancient art form with what's possible. So I'll start to design on the computer and use that as a tool for the kinds of lines that are possible, the motion, I don't know, just the curves. Then I'll translate to ribbons, felt ribbons with wire, and again, it's a study. It's never a direct translation, but I can have a better conversation. These, I knew a lot of you might be sculptors, or at least I hoped, and so I just made a collage of all the old tools, a lot of diamond grinding bits. Never is there sort of a hard, violent action into the stone. And I noticed that a lot of the architectural rendering that we do in the marble yard, and actually some of these pieces maybe in the previous slides you saw were made on a lathe. It's all about cutting under water jets and this kind of action. So I wanted to use that as my tool from the beginning. This just sliced a few shots so you could get a sense of weight and scale. Again, 90 to 95% of this material is removed, and so they become these very light, airy pieces. And for me, the manner in which I hold tools is completely wrong. No stone carver would ever do the things that I do. I like the idea of drawing. I probably work more like an etcher. Okay, the blocks. I'll draw the line on. Again, because it's a single line, I'm afraid of getting lost. So this sequence, I thought you could try and follow the progression a little bit. We'll go in and hollow it out with drills, and then these electric die grinders you can see on the top. If you follow this, you can see on this long line right here was this section right in here. So essentially, the idea is to create sort of a girder system, and then we'll move through. You can see where we start to drill in further, and we'll take out these chunks. They all come out about this size. At this point, there's a decision about orientation. And from this point on, the piece can't really be moved around. So this becomes a much more architectural piece. And the outside is then, this is when I start to decide the actual curvature and which areas will probably be cut. As you can tell, there's still a lot of space between these lines and these lines. And so here, this is about the point where they'll have to decide an orientation. And then the distance between each of the pieces will they'll move probably within ½ an inch or so. I love the calligraphic feel of these at the end. And again, I was trying desperately to do a single line. Well, to tell you the truth on this one, I got lost. So this one actually is 2 lines, but pretty close. Okay, so then once that's the emptying part, and then we get to the architectural part. So there's definitely an outside and an inside. So the outside it's basically about all of what I said, the architectural part of it. The inside becomes a 2-dimensional rendition of that reflection. So essentially we've got 4 panels going down into infinity, and this is where the discussion starts to be about space. And where I was thinking about gravity and could I make this box stand on itself, suddenly it becomes, how can I sculpt the emptiness that's inside that box? And so I look to people like Brian Greene, and because he has an amazing, I know he's the popular physicist, but he has some amazing computer graphics and just how to describe the matrix and the fabric that surrounds us all. Of course, Richard Serra is stellar when it comes to sculpting space, which feels anything but empty. The infinity columns then well, I think I started doing this just because I love the shape, and I wanted the challenge of, can I make something like this stand up? And it's I don't know, this one is about 70 inches, 4 by 4, and I don't know, sometimes I look at it and I'm not even sure I know how it stands up. But it's an amazing challenge. I think I truly enjoy coming up against something that is stronger and harder and will live longer than myself. It has such a story, and it's continually telling something back to me and forcing me to look to other solutions. the endless column, of course, Brancusi is forever an inspiration. But this is, again, looking towards trying to marry the traditional with a contemporary, where his is a shape and one imagines infinity. This piece is actually, again, a single line that loops back on itself. So I liked playing with that idea, and I referenced, again, physics and the concept of multi-dimensional space. And one of my heroines there is Lisa Randall. I think that I forever thought in terms of loops as the solid part of my piece, because that's where I was paying attention so that they would actually physically stand up. But when I was having the opening, I saw people, these guys, they're neuroscientists, counting the negative space as far as loops. And it completely changed how I was thinking about the sense of space. And I went back, and there are so many hours that one spends making these pieces. The idea of labor becoming its own, I don't know, for me, sculpting, it relaxes me. It's a place where I work out these complex problems, and suddenly life is possible again. So in the studio, I started trying to open up increasingly that negative space. Again, the process for all you sculptors. So matter, the conversation with matter, and does matter even really matter, to me is an art history question now. And this ongoing conversation with material has been one of the most intriguing and expanding place to exist. So I go and try and dig out the story. This is the place in Macedonia from which a lot of the material came. And now, unfortunately, for me anyway, most of it is going to the Middle East and Dubai and Abu Dhabi because it's so perfectly white. So I was very intrigued by this crystal structure. And yesterday we shot some SEM photographs, and you can see these right here, these three crystals, just how perfectly they fit together. And so the ability to make these sculptures, this very intricate work, is even possible. So again, a material dialogue that expands my life. I can't disregard that element. These are the calcite crystals that give it the sparkling. This data, all these calcium carbonate structures that I go to reference, I put these shapes all around me all the time in these collages. And I start to bring them together because all these calcium carbonate structures exist in life, and they succeed. So how can I push mine to succeed under the same constraints, the same gravitational constraints? And I was lucky enough to be at the Smithsonian photographing the seashells. And so the incredible beauty of the golden mean in these aerial shots stunned me. So of course, another point of influence. This book describing the golden mean is forever a great reference. Walking on the sand, looking at these patterns. Marble is metamorphosed calcium carbonate. So all those shells break down, they go to the sands, they become limestone, and then they become my material. So this is what you look at. This is the sanded, tight crystal structure of that material, and this is exactly why it can have that intricate patterning. So I love the idea that you could see through the polarized light all the different crystals and how tightly they were meshed together. This dialogue with nature continues through these, this is a weakness. But when I became curious about the weakness, I saw that it was a fluid stream. So this is actually, this bubble here is actually atmosphere that was captured when the crystal was cooling. So in neoclassical times, this would have been a piece of marble that would have been in the garbage. But for me, I felt like there had to be a way that I would preserve this tidbit of information, but it was also incredibly inspiring for the idea. So fluid is running through those stones. I start to isolate, like in this stone, I start to isolate that image, and then you kind of come full circle to some of the computer graphic images and design. And again, going back to, this is the block from the bank building, being defined by a single line. I love the light in the studio because you can actually see how thin it becomes. And it's in this thinness that you start to see the income stream, the fluid streams that I showed you, and all the points along that line of history. So when it comes to me, I'm just adding this one little line or one little idea in the long line of storytelling. In the exhibit, this was another infinity column because, again, the single line. The sketchbooks I threw in just because I'm sure everybody here is continually carrying their sketchbook around and studying the curves or jotting down their ideas. But I love how the two-dimensional and the three-dimensional that line can be sort of read as a calligraphic line, a line for defining landscape. The influences of that transition created this entirely different sketchbook, which also brought me to looking at how topographical maps describe three-dimensional space, and the Zen gardens of Kyoto, where you're looking at space as a field. Could I do that? Could I make somebody physically move around my sculptures and see them more as follow that line in something more than a moment, kind of a moment expanded? And could all these ideas be encapsulated in a single object? So once again, we get back to the box from the bank building, defined by these three lines or three loops, and emptied out. And then in the studio, I have all these blackboards where we started to design the bases and how I would try and carve the empty space that's now right down in here, which you can't see in there. Let's see. Oh no. Okay, we will see what happened there. Back to the box. So I took a photograph of all the blackboard images, and to show the progression of thought for the bases and how in the world you would sculpt empty space. And we came up, or I kind of thought the space-time 4 planes could do the job. And so then we suspended the sculpture over the base and photographed down the interior. So this is the sculpture of the empty space. So now maybe you get an idea of why I titled it The Emptiness in Matter. Here again, you have the outside and then looking down into the interior. And it was a very eye-opening discovery when those 4 curved planes created this amazing sculptural interior. So I started another sketchbook of symmetry and started playing around with symmetrical designs and patterning, looking at origami, some amazing TED conversations on origami. And the movie Between the Folds is highly recommended. Another sculpture, again, from a box from the bank building, opened up and then you peer down into the interior. At the end of all of this incredibly crazy controlled work, I have to put the pieces in another environment, and it's like the piece that you saw at the beginning. I chose a pool or something larger than myself because in that context change, I don't have to do anything or I can't do anything. And I get to see with this a static material in motion. Plus, it's just, I threw together a few clips because it's just beautiful how it starts to move and starts to become something completely different than a sculpture on a pedestal. And I think there's also something about keeping myself away from it anymore and letting go, and how hard that is after working on pieces for several years. So I think that leads to the next sort of body of work, which is really taking that aspect of control and blending it with the concept of just being. The natural stones, I should go back. The natural stones offer that the beauty in just their simplicity, combined with my work, sort of heightens the crazy, obsessive force of will, I guess. I think I've been highly inspired by Noguchi, by Andy Goldsworthy. Yeah, I love how they're able to integrate nature into their work. So these pieces sort of blend the human will and natural will. I think there is a wonderful quote by in The Little Prince about the most important thing about, let's see, what does he say? He says, what is most important is what is no longer seen. And I think that's true about art. For me, trying to describe art, I'm always terrified that will reduce the magic of it, that it will no longer resonate, because what I learn from it, and I think that's why I'm so engaged with the material, is something larger than myself, and I can't really put my finger on it. And if I did, wouldn't that diminish it? There's something in losing oneself to that intuitive feel of, I've just got to do it. So anyway, this is the new body of work that just opened in Los Angeles the last weekend. And I like especially this one, the last one, where my work is just lying over this piece, totally exhausted, which is kind of how I feel. Anyway, so then after that, I go home. This is California. And I guess for points of reflection and just letting go. But you can see how it sort of integrates. Anyway, so do you all have any questions? No questions?
What is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see you.
Yeah. You said something early in your talk about your work outliving you. When you're creating, do you think about the durability of the things that you're creating?
Yes and no. I think about the challenge first, definitely. And then after that, after they've been in existence for a while, I start to think about the durability. After the first exhibit of those collars, I was, I was amazed at how people interacted with them, and that changed very much how I started to look at them. And so yes, and I have started to look at things for outdoors and as far as consolidants and adhesives that will diminish the impact of the sun and that kind of thing. But for the most part, they're surprisingly durable. It's sort of like glass. If you carry it a certain way, then they're a grid, they're a matrix. I mean, it's amazing. Look, it was in the ocean. It was tumbling, and it didn't fall apart. At the same time, a single point, and like that, is gone. But obviously, it's fragile. Bob asked me today a question that I had long ago kind of forgotten, but part of the inspiration of this crazy work was that piece that you saw in the film there. Was in my studio at the end of the 90s and into 2000, and I was working on it almost as a conceptual piece. It was very big, and 9/11 happened, and I had so much anger and frustration that I didn't care about it anymore. Nobody was coming to the studio. There was no reason for it to live very long at all. Can you hear me if I walk around? And so I just started stabbing it and I just wanted to expand it. I was doing violence to it. And then it occurred to me that I wanted it to be incredibly fragile, that was the objective. I wanted it to live with the care of others. I wanted to create something that was quiet and fragile as the violence outside my window was loud and self-centered, self-serving. And so there was, I don't know, I guess there was an intention in that way. So.
In your single line sculptures, how do you achieve such a uniformity in your thickness as you go in, as I trace them around, and they seem almost the same size
Yeah. Isn't that miraculous? I think in many ways it's the tools. It's the tooling, and that's why I had the shot of the tools there. By using the same tools, I developed that instinct for
Do
it.
you measure once in a while to see if it's...
Not really.
No?
Not really. You kind of get into the flow of the curve, and the tool doesn't allow it, because I want a single edge, because I can kind of fake the thicknesses a little bit that way, and some of the thicknesses can be stronger down at the bottom. So with the single edge, the tool will create the same arc. So I still kind of think it's magic sometimes. But there's a certain, when you get into the flow of it, too, there's a rhythm that you know when it's off. It's really true. Sorry, up there.
A couple of times when you were speaking, you started saying we. Are you just referring to artists in general, or do you work with other people?
I do work with other people. As a sculptor, I feel like it's never quite honest if I just say I. And you saw in the Marble Yard, all those people, I stand on the shoulders of their work, whether it's moving the sculpture around with a forklift or moving the blocks around. Now, because I'm traveling so much and I'm old, I've had more people help me with removing the material from the interior and some of the sanding at the end. So the collar pieces, up until sort of midway in the ribbons, my hands were the only hands that touched the pieces, and now there are 2, sometimes 3, and there are definitely people helping me do the heavy lifting. So, and you know, and again, there's so many people that go into the creation of these pieces, whether it's the packaging, the crating. There's a special guy that does the crating of them now. There's the gallery, there's a special person that moves them around there. So I really feel like I'm part of the team.
Elizabeth, you carry on a conversation or dialogue with your medium. Are you also doing that with your tools and therefore imagining or creating any new tools?
Absolutely. In the images, you could see there were tools that we kind of, shaped for the pieces and, glued the paper on to get the specific angles. And I have a whole mass of tool drawings because they're fast and easy and fun, and you do have a dialogue with them. But I think I get stuck on the dialogue of material and matter because important. Craft and fine art have moved so far apart that I really want to bring them back together in a way that's honorable. You know, that somehow doesn't diminish the heritage of this material itself. And probably the same with tools. I mean, there's so many people that went into the creation of those tools. And now when I'm moving to doing some CNC cutting and lathe work with those pieces, I mean, there's how many brains went into creating that technology. So, I don't know, that's part of the weed too.
How many pieces have you had fail along the way?
Good question. I should have started off with that one. When I was doing the collars, I had none of them break. And I moved incredibly slowly on those. When I started doing the ribbons, the first one broke was the long column piece, and I got news that my dad had leukemia, and I backed up into it, and the tip, it was just about to be crated to be shipped, and the tip fell off and broke in 3 pieces. It was the closest to shattering I'd ever had for a piece. And I was devastated. I didn't know, I really debated, do I repair it or do I create a smaller column? And in the end, it changed my view on this question, because the reason I stepped back was so much more part of the story. I didn't have enough focus to take that kind of a body hit, and it physically changed that sculpture. And so I repaired it, and those lines are still there as part of the story of that piece. I've never had one fall, like, completely implode. I keep waiting for that day, because it seems to be my nature to kind of keep pushing to the edge. But that said, I have had the piece break I have had pieces break mostly in transport from gallery to client, which will keep me poor. But anyway, so I'm still waiting for that. But you know what? It's pretty easy to tell. You'll make your mistakes if you have been away for a while, and you'll cut too close to the edge. But it's kind of like running fast and furiously into somebody else's life with really heavy boots, and you just mess up the whole structure. You don't even know where it existed. And instead of walking in kind of like, or moving in like water and slowly getting to know your bearings. And if you do that, you tend to keep this side of pushing too far. But I've been doing it for a long time now.
Are there any other environments you want to integrate your work with?
Yes, I'd love to do them on BBC. I'd love to do it with like a cam, sort of a live action. And just because that's where it comes from, and there seems to be some sort of, to do an exhibit on a reef with the other structures that are like that would be very cool. Now I sound like a Californian. Awesome. It seems appropriate. I think that's probably why I took that piece that I had started in this one, that had started in California, and I mean in New York, and why it had, for some reason, it had to go into that ocean. So I also like the context better. Somehow the preciousness of being up on a pedestal changes the whole orientation. And when it's in the ocean, the number of surfers that came up thinking it was some exotic shark. It was really interesting, and nobody ever says that in New York.
In part because, when we see these in the gallery, we can't touch them. Does the marble flex when you get it that long?
It does. It's one.
Tap it, does it ring or anything?
It will ring. The flexibility of it, the memory, is one of the hardest things about shooting it, because I make all these little stays to go in between, but in the vibration, it will move and they will jam down, or they won't fit after a month of display. So that's still a problem I'm working out. I didn't realize how much they would move, where it would physically be a barrier. But it does ring, but it doesn't ring as much as I have some very thin panels that we've cut by the water jets, and their sound is beautiful. It is beautiful. This is much less so. I'm not sure why. Must be the shape. Yeah, but the memory of the material astounds me. Yes.
You said that you have an exhibit in New York now. Is that at the Herschel and Adler Gallery?
Yes. And it will be up until June 10th. Sort of a smaller exhibit of the room that I showed you.
Is any of the new work in there?
Most of all of this, I tailored this talk to be right now, of the right now. So it's up, the long columns and the stone pieces, the natural stone pieces are in LA, and the other ones are in New York. It kind of felt more New Yorky to go stainless.
How thin can you make the marble?
Good question. I think it's probably, the thinnest I've gone is probably an eighth of an inch, but that's still it depends upon where it is. That's still as a strap, an eighth of an inch, but within supports. The center part, these pieces are probably about a quarter of an inch, even though they go down, to much less. The main support is probably that. But I haven't completely pushed that. Sometimes the arcs I do, but I'm trying to leave a little bit of a line to give the arcs a little bit of support that you don't immediately see. One day I'll actually test that, but then it would have to break.
Oh, you mentioned clients. I was wondering, how are they displaying? Like, are they in a main room, or how are they?
How are they displaying it? All different ways. Some of them have built areas, like built sections.
Are any of them outside?
No, I'm anxious about that for a few reasons. Just because of the acid in the air, I don't know how long it would last. Mostly that.
With the older pieces, are you noticing any sag? Are you measuring them? Like, have they sort of relaxed as they've aged into a different shape?
Yeah, they've moved slightly. They haven't moved down like that, but they sort of moved over. I can tell. They have redistributed their weight. I don't know if I would call that sag, but I can tell some of the distances in the supports have changed. So it's more that they found their better weight distribution, and I think it's because they found their true weight distribution, I guess, because when we put the stays in, it's false. It's a false distribution through that line. So they do find it, and I don't know. Again, possibly in 5 years, that gravity is intense and constant. So.
How much of the idea is available to you after you created the piece?
That is what I've been thinking a lot about these last 2 weeks and getting ready for this talk, because I don't normally speak about process as much. I think about, so as I was looking back through slides, I saw things that I hadn't really noticed before. What continued to strike me was, am I a control freak or what? It's just so clear. Everything is so thought out. And I didn't realize that. I get so caught up in the idea or the challenge of it. Is this even possible? And that includes going down into describing this empty space, that I don't notice things like that when I'm middle of it. I'm so focused. So I think also I realized in organizing the collages how much my mind is bopping all over these ideas, just like that film, A Beautiful Mind. I have papers all over, everywhere, every structure imaginable. And when I try to organize them into any cohesive conversation, it was a real effort. I had to find the links once again. So I find that the labor in these really must be a calming mental process that I probably underestimate. So.
Could you tell us a little bit about the day-to-day routine in working in this body of work?
It has changed over the last probably 3 years. It used to be fairly monastic when I get into it. I'm an incredibly early riser. Like 4 or 5 a.m. I'll get up and do all the reading and emails. I'll be on the phone to New York for a couple hours because I'm lucky they get up late. But then I can get to the studio by about 7:30 when the sun is rising, and it's beautiful then. And so if I don't have to interrupt my day, the flow is so much better. And it really, I equate it much more to a practice than a manufacturing business. You know, it really has been a practice. The last year and a half, it's changed completely, and it's made me have to rethink exactly what I'm doing. In fact, this was the last thing that I said yes to before. I just wanted to step back, and because I don't want to give up the idea of the practice of art to the sort of the business of art or the opportunities of art, and I'm not quite sure where that line is, and I'm not sure how that will change my art. So I hope that helps. There's sort of a big question mark at the end where I've landed right now. Yes.
How do you package all of your art when you have a show?
I have a show. There have been 2 ways. Because insurance has been astronomical for me, I call them my trips across America. So I go back and forth across America all the time with my mom or friends, and we just throw them in the car, and I hardly package them at all because I know them so well. Now things have changed, and the work has more value. And so the insistence by sort of this greater structure around me is that I go full-on insurance, and I have a specific creator, and he does an incredible job, and we use probably the trucks that move a lot of the machinery into the technology world, or through the technology world here. The air